The Roman and Sasanian empires fought each other for decades, but in 589 AD at the Araxes River, the Sasanians were crushed by the Romans. In a fit of fury, the Sasanian Shah, Hormizd IV, stripped Bahram Choban of command. Deeply humiliated, Bahram turned his battle-hardened troops around and began a ruthless march toward the Sasanian capital of Ctesiphon. Desperate to avert total civil war, the panicked Persian court dragged Hormizd IV from his throne, blinded him, and placed his young son, Khosrow II. But Bahram pressed his advance, forcing the terrified Shah to abandon his capital and flee. The deposed Shah begged for asylum from his most bitter enemy, the Byzantine Empire. Seizing the opportunity, Emperor Maurice answered the call. The Romans advanced and crushed Bahram and killed him, restoring Khosrow II to his throne. In return, Khosrow had handed over large swaths of Armenia, Georgia, and crucial frontier strongholds like Dara and Martyropolis. For the first time, the two great empires are now allies, and Maurice turned his gaze toward the dangerous Danube frontier. But peace purchased at the expense of an exhausted treasury. Years of continuous campaigning had utterly depleted Constantinople's gold reserves, forcing Maurice to cut the army's winter rations and ordered them to live off the harsh lands beyond the Danube. The Roman legions, tired and freezing, refused to obey. A brutal mutiny erupted, led by a low-ranking centurion named Phocas. Declared emperor by his rebellious troops, Phocas marched directly on the capital. Maurice failed to defend his throne. Fleeing across the Bosporus, the deposed emperor and his young sons were captured and systematically executed. Word of the coup reached Khosrow II. The murder of his former benefactor was a catastrophic insult, but also the perfect opportunity. Claiming to be the avenger of his adopted father Maurice, and even parading a young man he claimed was Maurice's surviving son Theodosius, Khosrow declared total war on the usurper Phocas. To make matters worse, Narses, the highly capable Byzantine governor of Mesopotamia, openly revolted against Phocas and actively invited the Persian forces into Roman territory. The first blow arrived as Phocas dispatched a Roman army to defend the fortress city of Dara. But in 605, the Sasanian forces completely routed them in a brutal battle outside the walls. Dara was subjected to a grueling siege, and the fortress was captured by the Sasanians. In 608, the elderly exarch of Africa, Heraclius, launched a massive rebellion against Phocas, cutting off the vital grain shipments from Egypt to Constantinople. Syria and Palestine rapidly dissolved into a complex civil war between factions loyal to Phocas, supporters of the African rebels, and local religious minorities. Seizing upon this profound Byzantine infighting, Khosrow's brilliant generals, Shahrbaraz and Shahin, advanced through the Roman East, capturing Mardin, Amida, Edessa, and Theodosiopolis before launching deep cavalry raids that penetrated as far as Bithynia, within sight of Constantinople itself. By 610, the rebel general Heraclius the Younger, son of the African exarch, successfully sailed his armada into the Golden Horn, overthrew the hated Phocas, and was crowned emperor. Before his execution, Heraclius said to Phocas, "Is it thus that you have governed the empire?" "Will you," replied Phocas, "govern it any better?" The new ruler fully expected the Persians to cease their hostilities, believing that with the tyrant Phocas dead, the Sasanian casus belli had vanished. But he was deeply mistaken. Believing he was close to an ultimate total victory and the permanent restoration of the ancient Achaemenid Empire, the Shah ignored Heraclius's embassies and ordered his armies to press deeper into the Roman heartland. The year 611 brought complete disaster to the Levant. Sasanian forces smashed through the remaining Roman frontier armies and captured Antioch, the third city of the Roman world and the political linchpin of the East. Sasanian forces moved south with terrifying speed. Damascus fell shortly after, leaving the entire province of Palestine exposed to the Sasanian onslaught. Then came the year 614, and with it the defining tragedy of the era. The Sasanian general Shahrbaraz led his army to the gates of Jerusalem. For 20 days, the ancient walls of the Holy City were battered by Persian siege engines until they finally collapsed. What followed was a massacre of unprecedented proportions. Tens of thousands of Christian citizens were slaughtered, and the city's grandest churches, including the Holy Sepulchre, were put to the torch. But the ultimate blow was the capture of the Holy Cross, the supreme relic of Christendom, which was violently ripped from its shrine and carried away to Ctesiphon as a trophy of war. The loss of Jerusalem sent shockwave to all Rome. In the years following the sack of Jerusalem, Shahrbaraz marched the victorious Sasanian armies into Egypt. Overwhelming the disorganized local defenses, the Persians captured Alexandria and rapidly subdued the entire province. For the first time in centuries, the wealth and grain of the Nile flowed to Ctesiphon instead of Constantinople. The empire appeared to be in a state of irreversible collapse. The loss of the holy relics and the desecration of the sacred sites were widely viewed by the public as an undeniable sign of divine anger against the empire. Byzantium was bleeding out, its armies broken, its holiest treasures stolen, and its lands occupied by an enemy that seemed utterly unstoppable. The storm from the east had broken the Roman world, and the shadow of the Sasanian Shah now loomed over the entire horizon. Sasanian naval raids seized Rhodes and key Aegean islands. The Roman state was functionally bankrupt, its treasury empty, its soldiers unpaid, and its territories occupied. Desperate, Heraclius contemplated moving the capital to Carthage, but Patriarch Sergius and the citizens persuaded him to remain. In this hour of darkness, the church stepped forward to finance the war. Patriarch Sergius authorized the melting down of centuries of gold and silver ecclesiastical treasures, chalices, candelabras, and sacred vessels from the Hagia Sophia, converting them into fresh coinage. Through this unprecedented act, the conflict was transformed from a failing secular war into a holy crusade for the survival of Christendom. Breaking with 3 centuries of tradition, Heraclius made the daring decision to take personal command of the army. In the spring of 622, after celebrating religious services, the emperor crossed into Anatolia to assemble a new fighting force. He gathered demoralized recruits and subjected them to rigorous training. Heraclius restored strict discipline, drilled his troops, and used religious conviction to forge them into an effective striking force. Later that year, Heraclius moved his army into Cappadocia, threatening the supply lines of the Sasanian forces in Galatia and forcing General Shahrbaraz to retreat. Upon discovering a Sasanian ambush, Heraclius feigned a retreat, drawing the overconfident Persian cavalry into broken terrain before turning to strike with decisive force. The Sasanians were pushed out of Anatolia. For the first time in over a decade, the Roman army achieved victory. However, a new crisis erupted on the northern frontier. The Avars broke their treaty and surged through the Balkans toward Thrace. Forced to suspend his eastern plans, Heraclius returned to Constantinople and sought peace with the Avar Khagan. In 623, during a peace conference at Heraclea, the Avars launched a treacherous ambush. Heraclius barely escaped with his life, disguising himself under a common cloak and galloping back to the capital while Avar raiders pillaged the outskirts. Swallowing his pride, the emperor agreed to pay a massive ransom and send high-ranking hostages to secure his northern border, finally allowing him to focus on Persia. In 624, Heraclius launched his grand counteroffensive. Leading a 30,000-strong army, he marched through Armenia and Azerbaijan directly into the Persian heartland. Taking Khosrow completely by surprise, the Romans captured the royal city of Gazaka. In direct retribution for the sack of Jerusalem and the theft of the True Cross, Heraclius destroyed the famous Zoroastrian fire temple of Adur Gushnas at Takhte Soliman, reducing the ancient shrine to ashes. In 625 AD, incensed by this sacrilege, Khosrow II dispatched 3 separate armies under his top generals, Shahrbaraz, Shahin, and Shahraplankan, to surround and destroy the Roman force. Outnumbered and facing complete encirclement, Heraclius executed a masterclass in operational maneuver. Exploiting the rivalry and lack of coordination among the Sasanian commanders, the emperor struck each force individually before they could unite. At Aliovit, Heraclius launched a surprise night attack on Shahrbaraz's camp, scattering the Persian troops. Later, at the river Sarus, Heraclius personally led a heroic cavalry charge across a narrow bridge under heavy archery fire, shocking the enemy and forcing them into retreat. Although his tired forces were compelled to winter in Trebizond, Heraclius had successfully neutralized 3 Persian armies in a single season. In 626 AD, realizing that Heraclius could not be stopped in the field, Khosrow raised 2 massive armies, one under Shahin to engage Heraclius, and a 50,000-strong force under Shahrbaraz, which marched to Constantinople to coordinate a joint assault with the Avars and Slavs. Heraclius divided his forces into 3, sending one part to defend the capital, another under his brother Theodore to engage Shahin, while keeping the third under his own command. In June 626, the combined Avar, Slav, and Persian besieged Constantinople. For weeks, siege engines battered the land walls, but the defenders held firm. The turning point arrived in August, when the Roman navy intercepted and destroyed the fleet of Slavic canoes attempting to transport Sasanian troops across the Bosporus. Unable to join forces with the Persians, the Avars broke camp and retreated into the Balkans. Meanwhile, Theodore shattered Shahin's army. To complete the victory, Heraclius intercepted a letter from Khosrow ordering the execution of Shahrbaraz. The emperor slyly showed the letter to the general, prompting Shahrbaraz to withdraw his army from the war entirely. With Constantinople safe and Sasanian strategy in ruins, Heraclius prepared for his final stroke. The emperor forged a critical alliance with the Khazars. Heraclius secured 40,000 steppe warriors for the Roman cause. In the late autumn of 627, when armies traditionally retired to winter quarters, Heraclius launched a surprise invasion into Asorestan, the core Sasanian province in northern Iraq. Terrified by the enemy presence in his heartland, Khosrow II scrambled to assemble a final army under the veteran nobleman Rakhzad, ordering him to stop the Romans at all costs. On December 12th, near the ancient ruins of Nineveh, the two armies collided, as heavy cavalry clashed at close quarters. Heraclius, fighting at the very front of his lines, personally engaged and killed Persian commanders in heroic single combat. The battle raged fiercely for hours, but when Rakhzad fell in the field, the Sasanian line buckled. The Romans won a decisive victory, capturing dozens of Persian standards and slaughtering thousands of elite troops while routing the survivors. With the main Persian field army destroyed, the road to Ctesiphon lay wide open. Heraclius pushed south along the royal highways, arriving in early January 628 at Dastagerd, Khosrow's vast royal palace complex. Appalled and panicked by the swift Roman advance, Khosrow II abandoned his unbelievable luxury, fleeing toward his capital at Ctesiphon. Heraclius liberated thousands of Roman prisoners, thoroughly sacked Dastagerd, and set the magnificent imperial palace ablaze. Khosrow's flight proved to be his political undoing. Decades of unceasing wars, crippling tax burdens, endless forced conscription. And now the sight of Roman banners burning the royal estates shattered any remaining loyalty among the Sasanian elite. In February 628, a palace coup erupted in Ctesiphon. The nobility freed Khosrow's eldest son, Kavad II, from prison and proclaimed him Shahanshah. Khosrow was captured while hiding in a palace garden. He was put on trial before his own nobles. After suffering days of starvation and torture, Khosrow II was brutally executed, shot to death by arrows. Recognizing that Persia could fight no longer, Kavad II immediately sent emissaries to Heraclius bearing letters of peace. Heraclius, whose own troops were far from home and severely exhausted, eagerly accepted the terms. The resulting peace treaty restored the status quo ante bellum of 591. The Sasanians agreed to withdraw from all occupied Byzantine territories in Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and Anatolia, return all Roman prisoners of war, pay hefty indemnities, and hand back Christianity's most revered relic, the true cross. To contemporaries, Heraclius had achieved a miracle, saving the Roman Empire from the absolute brink of total destruction and dealing a fatal blow to Rome's oldest rival. However, decades of total warfare had utterly devastated the Near East. The Sasanian Empire plunged into a ruinous civil war, changing rulers nearly a dozen times in a few short years. The Byzantine Empire was equally crippled, its provinces depopulated and burnt, its treasuries entirely drained, and its armies depleted. Neither empire realized that while they had brought each other to total exhaustion, a completely new power was emerging from the Arabian Peninsula. Within less than a decade of the Battle of Nineveh, the unified armies of early Islam swept out of the desert into the weakened Near East. The shattered Sasanian Empire completely collapsed under the conquest in a matter of years, while the Byzantine Empire lost its wealthiest eastern provinces forever.